One in Three is intended for mature audiences. Episodes contain explicit content and may be triggering as they often include violence and other varying forms of abuse such as emotional, psychological, sexual, and physical. In most cases, names have been changed to protect all involved. Please note, statements and opinions of guests do not necessarily reflect those of my own. Hi, warriors. I'm your host, Ingrid. Last week's episode, I shared some statistics and terminology related to domestic violence with you. That terminology will come in handy now because today's episode is with an incredible woman who endured pretty much every form of abuse there is. In addition to the triggers I mentioned in the disclaimer, this episode also contains incidents of child abuse. This is part 1 of Kathy's story. Thank you for joining us today. I have Kathy, who is kind enough to join us all the way from Australia.
You're very welcome. I'm very happy to be here and share my story if I can to help others. That's really what I want to do, is be able to help others through this experience. So I've actually had 43 years out of my 57 have been spent on and off through abuse, one form or another.
You have quite a few different stories
within
your lifetime.
I do. Yeah. Where would you like me to start?
Whatever you feel comfortable with. I know you have a few different stories that you could share and you'd like to share.
Yes. Yeah, I do. So I guess I'll start with where it began. So one of my first memories, and I've clarified this with my dad. He doesn't remember it like I do, but he said it's definitely possible. I would have been about 3 years old, and I can remember sitting in his lap, and he had his feet up against the door. I believe we were in a laundry, or we were in a confined room, and I remember this butcher's knife coming through the door. And that is my first memory of abuse. My dad went through severe abuse with my mother. He tells me that she was stable until she had a hysterectomy, and she was introduced to drugs through a local doctor when she was young, and drugs played a part in her life. And I know he had the opportunity to have her committed to a mental institution when I was about 11, but he didn't want to do it for the children. He regrets that now, given what transpired after he left. So when he left, there's 3 of us, and he wanted us to go with him, but my younger brother was too little and he wouldn't have been able to go. So my sister and I made the decision to stay in the family home. Shortly after that, my sister became pregnant and left, and around the age of 13 is when the abuse really started for me. So I can remember before that sitting in my lounge room, as you do as a child, and watching cartoons and looking up at the wallpaper, and it was just covered in food and wine, where she'd throw plates and glasses at my father's head. And I remember when she tried to blind him by throwing snail bait in his face, she set the shed alight with him in it. So there were these things that I witnessed, but I guess she was still relatively normal to us children until he left. And the first real memory that I have of her being abusive with me was when, back in those days, you were lucky to have a phone, a home phone, and I'd gone to stay with a girlfriend, and I'd been out skating, and I left a message with the next door neighbour that I was staying the night. And when I came home, she was really, really, really angry with me. And it was just after my birthday. She'd given me a pair of jeans and a T-shirt for my birthday because money was tight. And I can remember I just copped one of her many beatings. So she got the jug cord, and in those days, beltings were normal. You know, it's against the law now, but in those days, you could smack your children to discipline them. But hers were vicious, like really extreme. So I can remember she ripped the birthday clothes literally off my body and then beat me with this jug cord, and it went from the top of my neck, the whip marks, to the bottom of my ankles. That was one. There was many more. In fact, a girlfriend said to me she can remember her whipping me up the street. I don't even have a memory of that. But there was a lot of physical abuse with my mother. There was a lot of mental torment as well. You know, one minute she would be loving and this beautiful parent, and then the next she was just abusive, verbally abusive, you know, calling me names and, you know, telling me I wasn't good enough and just making me feel like I was worthless. When I was 15, I ran away from home. I had bruises to 80% of my body and 3 cracked ribs. I remember her picking me up off the bed and throwing me on the floor, and I think that's how she cracked my ribs. Now, you have to understand, to meet my mother, you would think that she was perfectly normal. She would, in fact, there was a day, I digress a bit here, there was a day when, because we were made to go to church 5 days a week, and I can remember I was getting one of her beatings. I can't even remember what for. And the doorbell rang. And she said to me, "Don't you say a word." So I'm sitting there with tears streaming down my face. And she's gone to the door, and it's a minister. And I can hear her. And she's beautiful and she's normal. And then he left, and she came back in and just continued to beat me. So she had this persona, you know, she'd make chocolate slice for the church. And I had a conversation with my girlfriend just recently, and she said, "Kathy, you never told me how bad it was." And I said, "Well, your family was my escape," which they were. I mean, I told her bits, and I told another girlfriend at the time. So I've got 2 girlfriends that I've had since I was about 13. And the other girlfriend, I went into more detail with her about the abuse. And in fact, both of them saw my mother's abuse. But yeah, this day I ran, and Children's Services told my father that I should never, ever return to my mother. So they had the medical report that, said that I shouldn't, but I did. I returned, and I was pregnant with my first child, and I was living with her, and we had an argument. She came home drunk, and she said that alcohol was another issue. We'd find her out on the main street. We lived on the main street, on the grass, covered in a sheet, naked, in the main street. And she would have 3 tallies and a pack of Sarah packs. So that was really lovely to bring your school friends home to. But when I was pregnant, we'd had this argument. And she said to me that her boyfriend didn't want to be with her anymore because she had a daughter who was having an illegitimate child. And we got into an argument. Next thing I knew, she had me in a headlock. And I begged her. I literally begged her. I said, "Please, please, Mum, I've only got 3 weeks to go." And she kicked me in the stomach. And I went into instant labour and I dropped to my hands and knees, and I started crawling along the long length of this house on my hands and knees. I had tears just streaming down my face. I had to crawl down the front steps and across the grass to the neighbours. She slammed the door behind me, like I'm heavily pregnant crawling down these stairs, and she just slams the door behind me. I really didn't have anywhere else to go, so I returned home. I'd received a payout with a car accident, and I decorated her house. I'd painted her house. I'd recarpeted. I'd set up this baby's room, and I came home with my beautiful girl, and my friend was with me at this particular time, the girlfriend I was telling you about. And my mother, this was an argument over pegs, believe it or not. And she told me to get out. And I'm a fighter, and I paid her December. My daughter was born early in the year, and I'd paid her rent until the end of the year. And she told me to get out, and I said, no, I'm not going. I've paid rent. I've decorated, I'm just not going. Well, my girlfriend was sitting there at a dressing table. My newborn was wrapped in a bunny rug. She walked over to my newborn and blew her nose on the bunny rug that she was wrapped in. My girlfriend kicked her shoes off, like, I'm going to have her. And I'm just like, oh, just leave it. It's okay. It's okay. Obviously, I got her out of that. And my girlfriend left, and another friend came over, and she said to me, I bet you if I said, I'll kill your daughter, you'll leave. And she started to laugh. She had this wicked, evil laugh. I can't even describe it to you. And I said, what have you done? And I'd had gastro, and I had to put my baby on a bottle. And I thought she'd poisoned the bottles. And I went out to the kitchen, and I'm angry, like I'm really, really angry with her. And I look, and she'd set off a toxic flea bomb in the house. So I said to my friend, quick, get her out. And so he stuffed her under his jacket, and he ran. And I left with a few things. And I never went back. So, those were the really violent things that she did. I still had a relationship with my mother for many years, and it sounds ridiculous, but I really wanted a relationship, with my mum. She's my mum. And even she went on to have an affair with an ex of mine while I was with him on my birthday. I know this sounds like Days of Our Lives, doesn't it? It sounds really...
It does.
It sounds really out there, but I guarantee you every single thing is true. In fact, I have been debating, if money wasn't an object, I have been debating going and getting a lie detector test so I can show people this is true. And I do have witnesses and things like that can back up my story. So, yeah, she had an affair with my ex, which on my birthday, and that completely destroyed any self-esteem that I had. I don't understand having children, how somebody can do that, how a partner can do that, let alone your own mother. To me, it's inexcusable, and it's just plain cruel, and I still kept in contact with her until she started to abuse my children, and that was it. That was, we didn't have a lot to do with her. We were thousands of kilometres away from her as they were growing up. What she did to my daughter should have been enough, but I thought it was an attack on me. For some reason, I didn't think that she would, attack her grandchildren, but she did. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I said to her, if you get treatment, if you get help, I will be a part of your life. But if you don't, I can't. It's too toxic. And I saw my mother again. She ended up living with my brother, which is a whole other story. He sadly turned to drugs because of her abuse, and he ended up in and out of mental health institutions. But he had cancer, and I went and saw him, and she was there. And that was the last time I saw her. She said, "Can I give you a hug?" I said, "Sure." So she did. But when she died, I know this probably sounds horrible, but I'd said goodbye to her. And years and years earlier, I visually let go of her with love and with forgiveness. And I visualised these balloons just going up in the air, and I just let her go. And when she died, I didn't even shed a tear. I thought, I did think, I hope you don't come back and haunt me. I did think that. But I was told, I don't know if you believe in clairvoyance or not, but I was told that she was healed on the other side, and she was very, very sorry for what she did.
That's good to know.
Yeah, it was. It made me feel a bit better. But I still, my brother sent me some of her jewellery after she died, and I still can't look at it fondly. I don't hate her, but I guess I disassociated myself with that relationship. So my relationship with her was really estranged, and I went on to do everything that she didn't do. I tried to be the mother that she wasn't. She was extremely promiscuous, and I'm certainly not that. So any of the things that I saw that she did, well, I can't even imagine doing some of the things that she did. But yeah, so that was my first introduction to abuse. And of course, there's many, many, many more stories that can go in there. But yeah, that's probably the tip of the iceberg.
That's quite a bit for a tip.
Yes.
Did your sister ever keep in contact with her?
She did, and for a while, until my mother overstepped her boundaries with my sister. As I said, my sister was removed herself from the family home within months, and I won't go into her story, but she did overstep their boundaries with my sister, and my sister didn't speak to her for many, many years. There was a period where my mother would be at events and we weren't talking, like I wasn't. When I say we weren't talking, I was respectful. My journey is my journey, so I would say hello to her, but I just wouldn't engage in anything. There was I wouldn't meet with her in private, or she wasn't allowed at my home. There was none of that. That probably went on for a couple of years until my sister had her own experience. And yeah.
And how about your father? Did he ever comment on anything after you guys had distanced yourselves?
Comments, mad as a hatter comes to mind. My father is an honourable man. He's a veteran, and he's been to war and he's seen a lot of things, but he tends to live in the moment. He doesn't talk about it a lot, and the only reason why I talk about it is to help others. That's it. Like, my journey is not, I certainly don't want people to feel sorry for me, because it's over. Like, it was over years ago, and I don't hurt from any of the abuse anymore, any of it. And, it was pretty extensive. But I honestly believe we have, everything happens to you is a lesson or a blessing. And those lessons, it was after my final abusive situation that I went, what the is going on here? Like, why do I keep attracting these abusers? And look, I've had normal relationships. I really have. And I know what that looks like. I know what that feels like. I have a normal relationship, with my father. I know, what parenting should be, what it looks like. But for some reason, and I do know why now, and I guess that's why I can accept all of this, is I believe that it all happened to help others. That every single experience that I went through, people can relate to my story. They either know someone who's been abused, or they know someone who's going through it, or they've been through it themselves. When you have the statistics there of how many people are abused, it's phenomenal. And I took all of those lessons and I worked on a presentation. I did research for years about why I went through this abuse. I was going to be a counsellor, but I'm too old. So, well, I'm not too. I didn't want to study again. So I thought, well,
right.
I've got all the experience necessary, because I have had every single form of abuse that you can go through. So my story is certainly not as bad as some. There are people out there that have been through way worse than me. And there are people out there that have died at the hands of their abusers. So I don't pretend to know it all. I'm not a counsellor. I'm not a relationship expert. But I do think everyone that I do my presentation for, they walk away and they go, wow. They go, wow, at my story. And then they go, this is amazing. One of the ladies that I did it for, she has my booklet on her coffee table for her grandsons. She said they need to know about this. They need to know what abuse is and how to avoid being abused. So that's the reason, I guess, that one, my abusers don't hurt me anymore. I don't give them, I've healed through this journey by working out exactly why I've healed. It helped me to heal. And then being able to help others it just fills me. I hate that they're going through it, but it just fills me with so much gratitude that I can help others, and respect,
And that seems to be a common theme amongst anyone who's agreed to come on here. And there are a few individuals who told anonymous stories on the other podcast that I have with my sister. And it was the same idea that they're not doing it for revenge on their abusers because they didn't name them. They didn't say anything. They were doing it to let others know there are similar situations out there. And part of being able to heal is to understand that you're not alone.
Exactly. Yes, there is a whole world out there, and I found. Oh, look, so I guess when I tell you the rest, you'll see why doing this, my presentation, was so important. So I wanted to bring awareness to sneaky abuse. So I have had physical abuse. I have been sexually assaulted. I have had a shotgun held to my head. I have had my abuser split my head open with a bare knuckle and I needed 5 stitches. I have woken with my abuser at the end of my bed ready to commit murder-suicide. I've been held up by my throat and thrown across the floor. So I've had the physical abuse, and yes, it was horrific. Like, it was terrible. But I then went from the physical abuse. Many years later, I was in a relationship that had everything but that. So there was financial abuse, there was coercive control, there was psychological abuse, there was emotional abuse, and there was verbal abuse. The sneaky abuse, the way that it was done, the way that I was abused was just mind-blowing. I couldn't believe it. This person, when I met them, because I was very aware of what a physical abuser looked like, I could pick up on the vibes of that. I didn't see that with this person. I actually saw a lovely, lovely guy. That's what I saw. Quiet spoken, very well mannered. Whew. No. There were warning signs there, like there was with the physical abuse. I can remember the first time the physical abuse was introduced into the relationship. I can remember him punching the back of the toilet wall over something stupid. And I thought, it didn't feel right. But I didn't for 1 second think that would, turn to me. But the coercive control, I didn't see it was so hard to recognise those signs. It was so sneaky. So, for example, with the financial abuse, we would go away on holidays together and I had everything I wanted, or we had. There was this dismissiveness that I didn't work as hard as him, but I worked on every single business that we were in. So we'd go away on holidays together and he'd say, let's have $200 a day to spend. Okay, fine. That's reasonable. We can do that. But then I'd be holding the wallet and he'd ask 6, 7, 8 times a day, how much money do we have? How much money do we have left? How much money do we have left? And if you spent $50 one day, the other 150 would go to the next day. So it wasn't about budget, it was about control. And there were so many things like that, so many little red flags that, you'd be questioning why. Like, he would make sure that if I had a special event on, emotionally he wouldn't be there. Like, he just wouldn't be present for me. But then he'd show up on the day and, would do all these gallant things. But I would be left thinking, he was brilliant when we had visitors, so they never saw this side of him, which was extremely hard for them to believe me when this fell apart. Because I was stupid, and I call myself stupid, which is not very nice. I was naive, and he'd actually say that to me. You're too naive, you're too trusting, you're too nice. I'm like, how can you be too nice? Like, how can you be too nice? Well, I was for him because he took advantage of it. But he would be this beautiful person in front of others. And then when they would go, I would have this emotional distance. He would walk 5 steps in front of me and I'd be like, hey, I'm here, and he'd have a comment like, I didn't realise you stopped. And then when he wanted something, the love letters would come, the flowers would come. But as soon as he got it, bang, back to being Mr. Cold, Mr. Nasty, They often say, that abusive people have an extremely promiscuous past, and he did, and he kept that hidden from me for a long time. And I did find out. It was disgusting what I found out. That's not like, I'm not generalising, that's not always the case. Like, there are normal people out there that have had a promiscuous past who are sowing their wild oats, if you like. But his was, it was a degrading, it was, I'm not saying the women weren't, they didn't give their permission, because they did. But he would pick women that had no self-respect and would be involved in things that I don't even want to mention, but disgusting things that by the time I found out, I was invested in this relationship. Like, we bought a house together, and, I was like, you're not the person I thought you were. You told me you'd only had 3 girlfriends, and literally you've had so many more than that in ways that I don't even want to talk about. So there was that. And there were things with how he would treat his children and how he would treat mine. Like, those red flags were there right from the start. Mine weren't allowed to sit on the lounge and eat, but his were. And, we would do so many positive things with his children, but not with mine. I would, and I would object to it. Like, I'm a little firecracker. Don't get me started, because I will go off, so you cop this. But that in itself was another thing. I'm sure my neighbours thought that I was the abusive one, because he would start an argument with me. So I can remember one day we had our own spending money, and I bought a set of knives, and he abused me for 3 days over this set of knives. Now, he would go and buy what he wanted with his, and I'd buy what I wanted with mine. And I never objected to anything. That it was his money. Do what you want with it. But how he would abuse me, he would berate me quietly, really, really quietly, often with a smile on his face. And he'd say, be quiet. The neighbours can hear you. So then I'd get louder. And then I'd slam the door, and I'm not proud of this. I'd call him names, which is not who I am. Like, I'm not that, well, I am obviously, because I did it. But there's a thing called reactive abuse, which I now know that if anyone pushes me to that limit, they're not meant to be in my life anyway. So I do regret how I behaved in that relationship. I wish that I had left so much earlier. I wish I had known what abuse was, what the psychological, the sneaky abuse, because, oh my goodness, can I see it now? It's I sort of swung the other way, where when I first left, there was so much abuse after I left. I was never allowed to talk to exes or exes' families, and I've remained friends with, a lot of partners with him. Not a lot, I say a lot, I haven't had a lot, but I have remained friends with them. But I was never allowed while I was with him. So the first thing I did was, when we split, was, hello, how you doing? Just nobody tells me what to do. And I ended up reconnecting with somebody very special. And, of course, he then said that I left him for this person. Even though we'd been in separate bedrooms for 9 months, it was over, we were done, I was done. He told everyone that that's what happened. And very sadly for me, some of my family and friends believed him. Some of my family and friends still sit with him to this day. That was probably the worst part for me, because after I left, the abuse escalated. He destroyed my possessions. He pooed on my mattress. He peed on my clothes. He threw out precious items that I will never, ever get back, like a cup that my dad gave me for my 21st, and photo albums. Just gone. Just couldn't care less. Threw out things that meant the world to me. He ripped me off at least $200,000, at least, through the court system, through the legal system. He knew that he had me, in a corner that I couldn't get out of. He breached the DVO. I remember I had my computer. I opened it up. At that time, I was a professional photographer. I'd had a studio. I opened up my computer. This was probably a year and a half later. He abused me for 3 years after I left. 3 years. And I had a DVO, but he didn't care. He kept breaching it. He just kept breaching it. And I'm grateful that I lived far away. I was homeless for about 10 months during this time. I was couch surfing because he wouldn't settle. He refused to settle on the house. So I ended up leaving my children and grandchildren, which broke my heart, and going up north to my neighbour's unit. She had a unit up north. And it was actually a police officer who said to me, if you're going to put a DVO, be as far away from him as you can. And I did. And so getting back to the computer, I'd pulled up this certificate. I was doing a photo for someone. And it had on it, he blocked out the letters, and it said, abducts and kills professional photographer. It was on my computer. What proof do I have that he did it? The boxes came. When my stuff came, there was a coaster stuck on the tape. And it was a wedding coaster. Now, I threw out every single piece of stuff that he ever gave me. It was a wedding coaster, and it had on it, "One day closer, kiss, kiss, kiss."
That is a lot of abuse for one person to go through, and there is still more of Kathy's story remaining. I'm going to pause here for today, and we'll post her conclusion on the next episode. Until next week, have each other's back, stay strong, and always remember, it is not your fault. There is hope, and you are not alone. Thanks for listening. Find more information, register as a guest, or leave a review by going to the website 1in3podcast.com. That's the number 1, IN, the number 3, podcast.com. Follow 1 in 3 on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1 in 3 Podcast. To help me out, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 1 in 3 is a .5 Pinoy production. Music written and performed by Tim Crow.